Welcome back to Joy Recovery Radio, where we're dedicated to helping couples find healing and hope after sexual infidelity and betrayal trauma. We share real stories, practical strategies, and deep insights to support you on both sides of this difficult journey. We truly believe this message can change lives, and you can help us reach more people by engaging with our content. Wherever you listen, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, please hit that follow or subscribe button. A quick like and a 5-star review also goes a long way, helping others discover our community when they need it most. Let's dive into today's episode.
So I want to begin with a confession, and that is the first time I went through the 12 steps, you could basically describe it as I was auditing a class. I have to confess, I wasn't all in. I was kind of observing. I was dipping my toe in the water. It had some benefits in my life, but I did not experience the full benefits or the fulfillment of the promises that are in the program. And, I've met a lot of brothers like that the first time they go through the steps, it was shallow. They weren't all in. So when I hit what I would call the true rock bottom for me, and I was truly broken, that I have what I call GOD, the gift of desperation. That time through the steps, I took them for credit. I was all in. And what I've come to believe is that these 12 steps would help anybody. Any human would benefit from these 12 steps because they come from the Beatitudes, and any human would benefit from that. The Beatitudes are basically Jesus saying, here's an alternative way of being human that will lead to the most abundant life that you could experience. And so my thesis this morning is this. I believe that every human being in our brokenness and our fallen state, every son of Adam and daughter of Eve, has either some kind of addiction or some kind of unhealthy attachment or some kind of compulsion. Every one of us. Now, we're not going to compare struggles and we're not going to measure severity because those are certainly on a spectrum. But the thesis is this: we're all broken, and our brokenness expresses itself in various ways to various degrees. That's why lately I've been asking God, please help me to forgive those who sin differently from me. Because they're broken like I am, or what the big book would say, this is possibly a sick person, and I know what being sick feels like. So whether a human is a workaholic or a gymaholic, whether they're addicted to technology, tethered to their phone, death scrolling on social media, many of us porn addicts or sex addicts, but prior to that, many of us were approval addicts. The greatest dopamine hit we could get is if an adult just gave us approval and we felt like we pleased them. Some of us are control addicts, food addicts, spending addicts, shopping addicts, gambling addicts, you name it. In fact, just forget the word addiction for a moment and just realize that we all have unhealthy attachments that cause problems in our life. Or we use these attachments to a behavior or a person or a substance to medicate ourselves and to escape. And what the 12 steps are basically showing us, and what the Beatitudes show us, is that we can have a much better life if we arrange our life around certain spiritual practices that lead to intimacy with God, intimacy with self, and intimacy with others, in that order. So there's one specific scripture that I want to highlight and unpack this morning out of Jeremiah that doesn't use the word addiction, but it's totally talking about addiction. And it uses some beautiful imagery to describe it. This is what it says. The heavens are shocked at such a thing and shrink back in horror and dismay. So heaven is looking at what we people are doing and they're stunned. And God says, my people have done two evil things. Number one, they have abandoned me. And then he gives this description, this imagery, this metaphor of what he's like. He describes himself as a fountain of living water. The second thing that people have done that shocks heaven is that we have dug for ourselves cracked cisterns that can hold no water at all. Now, a cistern is simply a tank or a reservoir. So let's unpack this a little bit. The first thing I want you to notice is that God identifies himself as this, quote, fountain of living water. Living water represents life and sustenance, fulfillment, true joy, spiritual nourishment. And he is this divine source that is unending. He is the ultimate satisfier of our soul's deepest thirst. And when we forsake this true source, whether we're conscious about it or we're unconscious about it, when we don't drink from this fountain, we are left with this profound, unquenchable thirst, this void, this emptiness, this vacuum inside. And so what we do when we feel that emptiness and that thirst is we turn to substitutes. And that's what an addiction is. Instead of turning to our higher power as the true source, we dig our own cisterns, and they're broken. They're man-made. These reservoirs that we're trying to collect as much water as we can as a desperate attempt because we're lacking, we're empty. And the things that we substitute for God are what the Bible calls idols, what we would call addictions, attachments, compulsions. And these man-made cisterns that we dig for ourselves, he describes them as cracked or broken. That means that they leak, and ultimately they can't hold water that we're trying to collect. Ultimately, these substitutes, whatever that is, it doesn't satisfy. It just leaves us more thirsty. So in a very real way, addiction is this desperate attempt to fill this void or satisfy this deep thirst that only God, the fountain of living water, could possibly fill. So what we're describing is the human condition, not just some subset of humans called addicts. We're all humans. We're all broken, and we all find substitutes because we're empty. We're thirsty for love. We're thirsty for peace. We're thirsty for meaning. We're thirsty for pleasure. All of these appetites that ultimately we can only find in this fountain of living water. What we begin to experience is we get this temporary relief from our substitutes. They provide a moment of a high, this temporary, very brief escape from the pain and emptiness that we feel. But what Jeremiah is saying in this verse is they can't hold water. They don't provide lasting satisfaction. An hour later, there's no fulfillment. There's no true healing. In fact, not only do they leave us empty and unsatisfied, they usually make our despair even deeper, our emptiness more profound. And now they add shame to the equation. So because these substitutes that we create, because they're broken and they don't hold water and they don't satisfy, here's the insanity. We continually dig deeper, thinking if I just go deeper in the substitute cistern, then if I could just find the perfect image, the perfect video, the perfect person, or the perfect sexual experience, then I will touch the divine. Then I'll be satisfied. That will be enough water for me. And this perfectly describes the progressive nature of our addiction. So we go through all of this effort and labor and creativity and time digging for ourselves these substitutes that don't work. And despite all this effort, the outcome is we're further broken and we feel deeper insufficiency. All forms of addiction are basically idols. And when I say idols, scripture's not talking about a little figurine that we bow down and worship. An idol is a substitute. It is a cracked cistern. It's something that we create to take the place of God. the only fountain of living water. And in fact, if you're like me, you're polyaddicted. It's not just one substitute, there's a lot of substitutes. I've got a lot of compulsions and addictions and attachments in my life. It wasn't just sex. But what they all have in common is this: all addictions stem from one thing, a deep longing for love and connection. And we try to satisfy that thirst with created things instead of our creator. Or, like we've said before in some of our meetings, addiction is simply an attempt to escape from a present, unpleasant emotion or situation. So, what I want to do is I want to pivot for a moment. I want to challenge you to reframe the way you look at your addiction, because you've probably never looked at it this way. What if, just ponder this thought for a moment, what if your addiction is actually an invitation from your creator to have intimacy with him that you did not know was available? Because the working thought that we're unpacking this, in this session is all addictions, all attachments, all compulsions are a misguided search for union with God.
At joy-recovery.com, we offer personalized recovery coaching to help you move from pain to purpose. We also provide supportive groups where you can connect with others who truly understand. So, whether you're battling addiction, healing from betrayal, or rebuilding a brand new relationship, you're not alone. We can help. Go to joy-recovery.com today.
I don't know if any of you have discovered what I discovered this week. I did not know that this even existed, but it's quite fascinating. There were some letters in 1961 that were written from Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, to Bill W., the founder of AA. And these were deeply personal conversations with Bill. And in this conversation, one of the things that Carl Jung says is that he felt like the 12 steps were working because the only thing that would help an addict is a profound spiritual awakening. And he used this phrase, which I thought was fascinating. He used a Latin phrase and he said, addicts are using spiritus, spiritum. And it was a play on words that Jung was using. You know, the context is alcoholics. And sometimes alcohol is called spirits. And what Jung was saying is what addicts are doing is they're using spirits to try and connect with the spirit. He's talking about substitutes. So in the context of our sex addiction, what would that look like? We sex addicts, we had a misdirected spiritual thirst. We had this compulsive pursuit of some kind of sexual gratification so that we could feel this temporary, shallow sense of either connection or escape or power. And Jung suggests that beneath our compulsive behavior lies a deeper spiritual thirst, because what we're really looking for is wholeness, intimacy, self-worth, meaning and purpose in life, and some kind of sense of the divine that transcends us. So what Jung says is that we are unconsciously seeking 5 things. He says, first of all, in our addiction, we were seeking authentic intimacy. That is a true, vulnerable connection with another human being. But our addiction replaces that with some kind of simulated version or objectified version of that. And it's not real. And it doesn't satisfy. So the second thing that Jung says we're seeking is acceptance. That is a feeling of being worthy or being whole. But the addiction will temporarily mask this with some kind of false sense of being desired by someone, or this false sense of having power that we really don't have. The third thing Jung says we are unconsciously, meaning we're blind to it. We don't realize this is what we're actually seeking. In our addictive behavior, our acting out, we were actually seeking for meaning and purpose. Because there's this void in our life, and the addiction attempts to fill it with a temporary high, a sensation that disappears quickly, and then it's replaced with shame and deeper emptiness. The fourth thing he says we addicts are unconsciously seeking is transcendence, and that is a desire to escape the mundane, difficult aspects of reality, to feel connected to something larger, something divine, something that transcends our reality. And our acting out offers this in a very false, distorted, and unfulfilling form. But we keep digging deeper, thinking we're going to find transcendence, and we don't. And then finally, he says that the addict is unconsciously seeking, how do I regulate my emotions? That acting out is an attempt to cope with anxiety and stress and loneliness and shame and other difficult emotions that come from trying to substitute created things for our creator. Acting out provides this temporary numbness. And it was the way we emotionally regulated, but it was dysfunctional and it was destructive. It was not a helpful coping mechanism. So he goes on to say, I love this phrase, all addicts are basically frustrated mystics. I love that. Our pursuit that we don't even realize is for the divine. We're looking for God. We're just looking in the wrong place. We dug a substitute and it doesn't work. The theologian from Britain, G.K. Chesterton, put it this way: the man who knocks on the door of a brothel is actually seeking God. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So Jung goes on to say that the spiritual awakening that the addict needs could occur through three things. Number one, an act of grace. What does that mean? When a person goes through the steps, there is this sudden, profound spiritual shift. There is this spiritual awakening. And I think the key word is awakening, because we didn't realize we were in a coma spiritually. We didn't realize that we weren't living. We didn't realize how parched we were. We didn't realize that our thirst was for God. We were frustrated mystics. We were seeking God and didn't know it. When we go through the steps, it connects us with that fountain of living water, and it transforms our entire existence. Second, he says, if we want to have this spiritual awakening, it's got to be through intimate and honest connection with others. And then finally, and I think this is really critical, and I know some of us struggle with this, it's going to require a faith that goes beyond logic and mere rationalism. If you think about it, if you could figure God out, then he's not God. He's not really a higher power. Now, let's put it in context. We are bipeds. We have a 3-pound brain. We are on a spinning ball in space that is moving through the universe at a speed of 60,000 miles per hour. And we think we can figure out God. The faith that we need to have for a spiritual awakening needs to go beyond requiring this higher power to answer all of our questions. Faith requires us to act as if he's real, that he is a fountain of living water, and we're willing to give it a try. That's all our program asks for. So with that in mind as kind of an introduction, let's bring it back to where we wanted to land, and that is the 12 steps paralleled with the Beatitudes. And so the Beatitudes are basically qualities of someone who is completely surrendered to God. That's what Jesus is teaching. So he says the very first quality, the very first Beatitude, is that you are poor in spirit. What does that mean? You're broken. What step does that parallel with? Step one, where we admitted we were powerless over blank, whatever blank is, whatever your attachment, addiction, compulsion is. It's a person, It's a substance or it's a behavior. We were powerless over this. Our lives had become unmanageable. So, in a very real way, when we say, I can't anymore, God says, good, now we can get started. So, our powerless is not a resignation, it's surrender, and there's a difference. It means that I take the sheriff pin off of my chest. I'm no longer in charge. And I say to God, do with me what you want. I have nothing left. I'm empty. Now, the opposite of this is self-reliance. It's living each day, leaving God out of it. And what I want you to notice is if you embody the column that's called opposite, I would argue you're not in true recovery. You haven't fully surrendered. You're not drinking from that fountain of living water. You still have substitutes in your life. Step 2, Jesus says, blessed are those who mourn. What is that quality? Because of our brokenness, we are full of remorse and regret. Remorse is grieving over what they lost because of our sin. Regret is grieving over what we lost. So remorse is grieving for others and how we damaged them. Regret is grieving over ourselves and what we lost because of our sin. We mourn, we grieve. There's sorrow for the substitutes that we used and how it's brought damage into our life. The parallel to this is step 2 and 3, where we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Now, some of you may have a problem with the word sanity. You may be saying, well, I'm not insane. Okay. Then substitute the word sanity for wholeness. Do you feel like you're completely whole? Because that's what we're talking about here. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to wholeness. And I love the fact that it says came to believe, because we're all on a journey of deepening our faith in this higher power. I resonate with doubting Thomas, one of the disciples who said to Jesus, I do believe, but would you please help me with my unbelief? Because we always have this measure of unbelief. We are coming to believe. It is a journey. It's a process. Now, it goes on to say in step 3, we made a decision. So there's this defining moment as we're coming to believe in our faith journey. There is this definitive moment where we turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. So basically, what I love about the Beatitudes, what I love about the teaching of Jesus, what I love about the steps is that it sets this really low bar for friendship with God. If you would just be willing to be open, to believe, to act as if he's there, to act as if there's a God who has your best interests in mind, he longs to be your friend, he has more power than you, and he wants to make you whole. He wants to stop the insanity of the digging for substitutes for him. If that's where you are, then you're fully surrendering. By the way, step 3, I think I've already done that 4 times today. I probably do it at least 12 to 20 times a day. These aren't steps that are one and done. This is a way of living. Every time I find myself in the driver's seat and I'm realizing that I'm in control, I have to do step 3 and turn my will and my life over to the care of God, that I'm taking control back. And I know where that leads. So if you really want to sum up step 1 through 3 in its simplest, purest form, it's this: I can't, God can, I think I'll let him. That's what we're talking about here. Now, the opposite is having a hard heart, self-reliance, and stubbornness. The third beatitude is that Jesus talks about is blessed are the meek. And that quality, you know that you're fully surrendered to God when you're humble. Now, what's the opposite of that? Pride, ego, entitlement. So this is based on step 4 and 5. Step 4 made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So we had a list of all of our transgressions. And step 5, we admitted to God, self, and one other human being the exact nature of all of our wrongs. That destroys pride, ego, entitlement, and that makes us humble. We don't have an inflated view of ourselves. So that's 4 and 5. The next beatitude, Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. What does that mean? That we used to hunger and thirst for lust, and it never satisfied. Now we hunger and thirst for doing what our program calls the next right thing. That's all we focus on. That's what righteousness means. It means right living. That we hunger and thirst now not to substitute for God, but to drink from him and just show us the next right thing to do. That we live our lives on a very simple spiritual plane. I just want to do the next right thing. That God, give me the knowledge of your will and the power to carry it out. The next right thing. That's all I care about. That's my new hunger. That's my new lust. I lust to live for you. The word lust means desire. My strongest desire now, in my brokenness, in my emptiness, in my humility, is that I just want to do the next right thing. And this parallels with steps 6 and 7, where we have God remove all of our defects of character, all of our shortcomings. Now, the opposite of this would be if we're still selfish and we still have substitutes for God. That would be the opposite of hungering and thirst for righteousness. The fifth beatitude is blessed are the merciful. The quality of someone who is fully surrendered to God is they are a forgiving person. The opposite would be resentment. If you still have resentment in your heart, bitterness, unforgiveness, it's stuck, you can't let it go, you're not fully surrendered yet. The quality of someone who is fully surrendered to God, who's drinking from that fountain, who has made their moral inventory, confessed it all to God's self and one other human being, and they've asked God to remove their defects of character, the result is this person doesn't judge others anymore. This person doesn't hold on to resentment. They are full of mercy. And so it parallels steps 8 and 9, and that's where it says that we make a list of everyone we've harmed, and we became willing to make amends unless to do so would injure them. So the opposite is resentment. The next beatitude, Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart. Well, what does that mean? The quality is this. We have an undivided heart. We don't have a life that's compartmentalized anymore. It's integrous. The word integrity means integrated. We're the same person no matter where we go. We don't have this double life anymore. We're not duplicitous. We're consistent. We're pure in heart. We're living a life of integrity. Full honesty. The opposite of this would be still being deceptive. We're only as sick as our secrets, is what our program teaches us. So this parallels with step 10 and 11, where we take a personal inventory every day. We promptly admit if we're wrong, and we seek through spiritual practices like prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand him. The next one is, blessed are the peacemakers. This quality, what that means is we are healers. We've been healed. We've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, and now we carry that healing to others who still suffer. And we practice all 12 steps in all of our affairs every day. So now it's a way of life. If you're wanting your partner to heal, one of the main ways God's going to heal her is by healing you and making you a healer. You're a peacemaker. The opposite of this would be an abuser. You don't bring peace, you bring strife, pain, destruction, harm. A person who's doing a true program, who's fully surrendered to God and drinking from that living fountain, is not going to be abusing his partner. The very last beatitude kind of sums them all up and brings them all together. And he says, blessed are those who are persecuted for doing the right thing. And what this quality is courage. If you're going to live this way, you're going to be different than most humans on the planet. This is an alternative way of being human. Jesus called this the way. And it's a narrow road. Most people don't live like this. That if you want to follow him, this is how you live. This is the way to be fully human. To drink from the fountain instead of creating all these substitutes that just leave us empty and wreak havoc and destruction in our lives. So this is an alternative way. Bill W. gives 12 steps that lead to an alternative way of being human. That's why I'm convinced that these spiritual practices would benefit anyone, not just quote unquote addicts, but any broken human, which is all of us. But if you do this, it's going to take courage, because the opposite of this would be to still conform to the pattern of this world. You won't fit in anymore if you embody this way of living. You can't fit inside the man box anymore. You won't fit in with most men, because most men are self-reliant, hard-hearted, full of pride, ego, entitlement. They are selfish. They have substitutes for God. They're full of resentment and bitterness. They're deceptive. They're sitting on secrets. They abuse people, especially women, and they live in the man box. So if you want to be a freak, then embody this way of living, and you will be persecuted for it. You will be mocked. You will be made fun of. You'll be ostracized. You'll be weird. You won't fit in anymore. It takes courage. Now, if we look at the progression relationally of the steps, it goes like this. Steps 1 through 3 is about mending and deepening our relationship with God. It's broken. We abandon him for substitutes. So now at steps 1 through 3, we come back to him and we begin to drink that living water that quenches our thirst, and it's an unending source of nourishment for us. Then as we go through step 4 through 7, we mend and deepen our relationship with ourselves, because we didn't know ourselves. And apart from knowing our Creator, we can't know ourselves. It takes a relationship with him to fully have a healthy relationship with ourselves. And then the next progression in step 8 and 9 is to mend and deepen our relationship with others, because in our brokenness, we also broke them. And there's some amendments that need to be taking place. And then finally, when you look at steps 10 through 12, it's developing a lifestyle, a way of living daily that cultivates health and wellness in all three domains of these relationships moving forward. So relationship with God, relationship with self, relationship with others, and then making that a way of life, a healthy way of living. Another way to look at the progression of the steps is the steps 1 through 3 is giving up. Steps 4 through 7 is cleaning up the mess we've made. Step 8 and 9 is making up to those we've harmed. And step 10 through 12 is growing up. Stop being a boy who could shave, a kidult, and be a real man who lives this way. So I want to end with a challenge. Are you focused on reforming or transforming? Because there's a difference. Are you going through the steps as a way of reformation, or are you going through them as a way of transformation? And let me draw the distinction. Reformation is a self-improvement project. You're engaging in behavior modification. You're drawing on your own willpower, and you're trying to implement very deep, profound change. And it doesn't work. And then we blame the steps. The steps don't work. But we went about them wrong. We didn't fully surrender. We're not drinking from that fountain. If you contrast that with true transformation, this is when you give God consent to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. And this is where we experience true heart transformation. Reformation is auditing the steps. Transformation is actually taking them for credit.
That wraps up another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. We hope our conversation today brought you clarity, comfort, or a new perspective on your journey. Remember, healing is possible, and you don't have to walk this path alone. To learn more about how we can support you, visit us at joy-recovery.com. There, you'll find information about our individual and couples coaching practice designed to provide tailored support for both addicts and betrayed partners. You can also explore our various online groups, offering safe and confidential spaces for connection, shared experience, and growth. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, choose joy.